Hello, and welcome to AI Frontiers, where we bring you conversations with the people currently working at the far edges of artificial intelligence. Before we get started, I want to tell you a bit about Valory. Valory is the premier creator of open source frameworks for co-owned AI. And since our launch in 2021, we've been focused on agent-based technologies with a special emphasis on decentralized autonomous agents. We want to empower communities, organizations, and even countries to co-own the AI systems of the future. It's our belief that artificial general intelligence will likely be agentic, and that's why we're collecting and sharing this wide range of perspectives with you. Recently, I spoke with Adam Silverman, who's the co-founder of Staf.ai and AgentOps. We covered a lot of ground in our chat, and I think that the ideas he shared will be of use not just to AI agent developers, but anyone looking to improve their productivity and general experience of work. So, here's my conversation with Adam. So, hello, Adam. So as we get started here, it'd be great if you could tell me your name and what you do for a living.
Awesome. My name's Adam. I'm the founder of AgentOps and Staf.ai. So our goal is to basically make autonomous agents super reliable. And we also have a directory where business owners can actually come and find the agents that make the most sense for their business.
Right on. Cool. A perfect place to start then is the definition of terms. I'd love to know how you're currently defining an AI agent.
It's a great question. From my perspective, I think the piece that a lot of people in the space maybe lack when they talk about definition is reliability. So I think the first most important piece is what is an operation or workflow that a human does, and can it be automated reliably? And that's the piece where I always like to emphasize. I really think about agents as anything you do with like your mouse and your keyboard on your computer is something that eventually will get automated. Any workflow that you do that maybe combines multiple applications, multiple APIs, and think about like an end-to-end workflow. That's kind of the long-term goal here is like, can we automate these entire workflows and have a process in place so that humans can actually focus on doing the human aspects of the job opposed to these processes that, for lack of better words, are robotic processes that a robot is much better at doing.
Yeah, right on. That's something I've been thinking quite a lot about is the workflow. Like where's the best place for an agent to step in and where's the best place for us to help them? And right now, I think we're going to do a lot of that, right?
I think that I always want to keep humans in the loop. And I think that you will always need a human to instruct these agents. Like, I don't know, there's some people out there that maybe, a few years down the road think that you're going to have like AI agents completely just being fully autonomous. But I think for the next 3 years, you're going to always have a human in the loop. And there's going to be this process where, a human gives an input, the agent maybe comes back with some, questions that it has. And there will be this kind of back and forth action where in the same way you're communicating with a coworker on Slack or Discord, your agent's going to reach back out and if they need something that like need clarification on a question or need some additional piece of data, they're going to be coming directly to you. And I think this is where we're going to see the kind of agents evolve over the next couple of years. Down the road, I think that there's a lot more opportunities, but I'm just trying to frame it in the context of immediate term.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you have a pretty clear idea of what makes something an agent. So it would be great if you could provide me an example of an AI agent, but then contrast it with something that you don't consider an AI agent, because sometimes there's a little bit of ambiguity or gray area here.
For sure. I think that there are processes that I would consider not being an AI agent. Maybe I'll start with that. So I think that you can think that, just doing RAG, for example, not necessarily an agentic workflow, but the second you do RAG plus, and adding a few more steps on top of it, that I feel like is more of an agentic type workflow. I think that like a great example like of an agent, and one of our early partners is Multion, where you can basically give it a single prompt and it can go on the internet and do a task that a human that otherwise would have done. This is like an agentic workflow, and there's a lot more examples I can jump into. But I see that this is kind of like the future promise of these agents, where it's like from a single prompt you can have your what you would do on a mouse and a keyboard. Otherwise, it is fully taken control of and can actually go and do outputs that are at the same quality as a human.
Okay, that's interesting. And then something that's maybe seems agentic, but you don't consider an AI agent.
So I think that there are traditional, like I would look at like a Zapier or something like that, where like you can add a bunch of workflows together, and at the end of the day, you're just linking APIs. I think there are some like maybe agentic natures there, but I wouldn't call it a true standalone agent, because maybe the reasoning aspect is not as you're not maybe using like an LLM for reasoning. So you can put together a process, and I think stringing together a bunch of Zapier zaps together will get you something that is more akin to like an RPA type process. But I think from where we're looking at it is just having some type of reasoning, having some type of like autonomy of thought. I think that is maybe the missing piece there right now, and I don't think I wouldn't discount it to say that they're not going to come out with something that fully matches that.
Yeah, a few times now you've mentioned kind of like taking a human-centered workflow and automating parts of it. So it sounds like a distinction that I'm seeing there between like chaining several APIs together is the way that works is really not the way humans work.
When you think about it, it's just like what a human does on their computers. Basically, you use your input from your brain, and then you go on a mouse and a keyboard, and that's basically you interact with your computer. But I think you will get the same something very similar, where now the LLM is almost the reasoning part that use your human brain talks to the LLM, and then the LLM gets the mouse and the keyboard, for lack of better words, to actually interact with the computer, and you will get outputs that are the same as a human. So this is like kind of maybe the long tail of where it goes. But yeah, hopefully that adds some clarity.
Yeah, yeah, there's a little bit more flexibility. Often a human workflow, we pause quite a bit more and maybe take different directions. Whereas if you've chained together a very complex set of, for example, Zapier actions, it really only works if through the instructions that you've given it. And it sounds like you're describing something that mirrors the human reasoning in a workflow a little bit more. Is that right?
For sure.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about your personal background, and maybe you could tell me how you got into AI in the first place.
Awesome. So yeah, maybe not so traditional relative to some of the other guests on the platform, but yeah, I went to business school in Canada. Was always kind of interested in automation from the ground up. So I worked at a firm in private equity, and I was spending like 12 to 15 hours a day in Excel. And I looked at in PowerPoint, and I looked at like all the tasks I was doing, and it was like extracting data, pulling data, making financial models. And I always thought that this is at the end of the day, like this is not like a human task. Like there isn't a lot of like, maybe when you start messing with the model and changing variables and like actually trying to change the output, and maybe that's a bit more human. But I felt like a lot of like the blunt, raw, maybe like input work that I was doing into these financial models wasn't necessarily the most human aspect. And I remember back then I was trying to look on Google, is there something that will automate this process? Is there something that will make my job more enjoyable? At the time, there wasn't really anything. And I went on to like starting a company after we weren't necessarily AI focused, but more so in like the software space. But I was always like very interested in the cutting edge AI research. So I was like reading research papers. My co-founder and I, we've been like sending research papers to each other for years. And I thought that there was like a lot of really interesting stuff happening in the labs, but it wasn't necessarily coming to market. And that's like, to me, I just saw like thousands of hours of work would go into these amazing research papers. And then it would like almost like live and die in the lab. So I always thought like, how do we actually bring these, types of this cutting edge research to market? And that's what we started doing actually a few months back. Was we actually built a data entry automation agent. So basically, going back to my work in like private equity, we'd extract data from a PDF or like a 10K or 10Q, and we'd automatically parse the data and put it into Excel or onto an online form. And to be upfront, like it was working 90% of the time, but on 10% of use cases, we were getting these really nasty support messages being like, it's not working on a drop-down menu, it's not working on a GDPR banner, and all these kind of like more like edge cases. And that was when we started actually building like a debugging tool internally, which became the inception of AgentOps. So we realized it was really cool to build agents. We still like down the road definitely have an interest in building agents. But right now we're dead set focused on like providing observability, providing compliance to like agent developers, and allowing them to actually make super scalable and reliable agents at scale. So that's kind of how we got into it. I will say though, for anybody listening who's maybe more on the, hey, I'm thinking about agents, how do I get, I'm thinking about AI as a whole, YouTube, it will be your best friend. Before you even get into the research papers, there's a few people out there who I think are like, from my perspective, I had a few professors in my life that truly left like an impact on me. And there's a few YouTubers I would say that have done the same. So there's one fellow, his channel name is 2 Minute Papers. And he just basically goes out, and they're not 2 minutes, they're usually about like 10 minutes in length, but he goes after, the like very complex academic research, and he explains it in the same way like a 10-year-old could understand it. And that was a really interesting thing for me to basically go watch his high level, like almost like reading like the abstract initially of like a paper, but like go watch his video and then go read the paper after. And that like it contextualizes a lot of the information for you. And he makes it so simple that to me, it's like it's almost the missing piece I think that a lot of people need, where it's, okay, I watched this video, it's 10 minutes in length, maybe some of the concepts you're reading in there or like listening about, you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about, but then being able to actually go read the much longer paper. And then as you're reading it, you're starting to see, okay, this is interesting. This is something that I now I understand what he's talking about in the video, and making those connections to me was like a game changer. So kudos to that channel. And there's a few other like incredible YouTubers that I recommend. So if anyone's listening, like Matthew Berman, AI Jason, and there's a few other ones that like, if anyone reaches out, I'm happy to share some other ones. But from my perspective, I think like if anybody's like really interested in the space, thinks this is really cool, cutting edge technology, start with YouTube first and then go into the academia, because it'll make your life like a lot. I think it'll make fill in a lot of the gaps and make sure that like they're contextualized for what you're learning.
Yeah, that's a very good approach, I think, to learning anything that's quite complex, especially in this field where, yeah, I mean, there's so many incredibly interesting papers coming out. I noticed that you mentioned seeing parts of your own workflow in your previous work where you could see that a lot of what you were doing didn't necessarily need you there. But I did think it was interesting that you described an experience that I've certainly had in my own work trying to automate or trying to agentify something of these edge cases where something strange, that 10%, it sounds like that's a problem that you're attempting to solve, is helping people understand why an agent didn't perform its task correctly, and how to work around that. Do I have that right?
For sure. Yeah. So like in traditional software development, like there's always debugging. And I think that that last 10% is what accelerates basically every enterprise in the world to start adopting this technology. If you're like a big bank, 99.9% reliability isn't actually even good enough. You need like 100% reliability where the only downtime is like if there's a server outage. So you can put in redundancies and you can mitigate these types of risks, but you really need something that is like super, super reliable. And I think that a lot of these agent developers, you see these perfect path demos on Twitter and you're like, wow, this is incredible. But the second it goes half a degree or 1 degree off that perfect path, that's where you start to see this, like, that last 10% piece coming into play. And I think it's super interesting. I think from our perspective, like that is, you will see, those companies who can close that like last 10% gap are going to be the clear winners in the market. Because I think a lot of, even a lot of the developers like we see, it's like, I think they're thinking, okay, I've done this incredible research. I have a product that works, but maybe consumers are okay with 90% reliability. But when you start thinking about, and we're very focused on like enterprise sales, like when you start thinking about selling to these massive organizations that maybe are making like trading decisions based on these agents, or like have like HR decisions or sales decisions based on these agents, there's no opportunity for any variability there, and that last 10% is the most important gap to close.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And we're definitely going to return to maybe some ways to close that 10%. Before we move on, though, I wonder if you had any moments in your early experiments with this tech where something really amazed you, or you had this like wow moment. Is there anything that stands out?
Like the agents are always like, like Meta GPT. I remember like the first time I got it to like build me Snake Game. It sounds like hilarious, but it was just like, I was like, I gave it an input and it just, it built me an entire Snake Game end to end. That was like, blew my mind. But the part that like really was like, I think like maybe not even on the agentic side, but on the AI specific front was like when GPT first came out, I remember showing it to my dad and he's like, why does anybody go to university? Why does anybody go to college? He goes like, this has the corpus of all information in the world. Now, like, and my dad and my mom like are now like avid chat GPT users. They use it to write emails. They even ingrained in their workflow. But I remember like the first time, like, I'm sitting there with my dad on the couch showing him this, and his mind actually exploded. And like, he couldn't really, he couldn't even put into words how cool it was. And then when I showed him the image generation, yeah, it was like at the time not even close to where it's at now. But he's like, I don't understand how this like is coming to fruition. Like, how does this actually work? How does it have the answer to everything? And those are the types of moments where I realized that there are like going to be legacy companies out there who are very reluctant to adopting this technology. There are people who are going to say, I have my process. We've done this process since, for the past couple decades. We know this process works. It's incredible. Then you're going to have the people like my dad who look at this and are like, wow, this is insane. Let's figure out a way to implement this. And these business owners are going to be like light years ahead of the other people, because you're going to be left in the dust if everybody's automating their processes, if everybody's adopting the latest and greatest technology. And it makes me really like excited, I think, for the future where, you can supercharge employees. There's no reason that, and kind of going back to my initial, work experience, like there are objectively robotic processes in everyone's workflow. There are things that like no one wants to do. So get these people, like empower people to have time back in their day-to-day, empower them to focus on, if someone wants to do sales all day and is the best at being on sales calls 12 hours a day, that's where their focus should be. They should be focused on data enrichment and, updating Salesforce and, trying to book customer meetings. Like they should just be, if they're interested, they should just be on sales calls 24/7. That's their skill that they have. And that's kind of where like, I kind of see the world moving towards, is just, I really, empower people to think about what in your day-to-day job is something that you think a robot can do. And I think we're, in a lot of these use cases, maybe we're already there, and maybe some of them were like 6 to 12 months away from actually automating full end-to-end workflows where you can wake up in the morning and be like, I don't have to do all these parts of my job that I hate. When I think about my parents' example, like responding to emails sometimes for their customers, it's like they're getting better responses. They can respond quicker. They have canned responses that are beautifully written because of ChatGPT. And to me, like, it's like, it's improved their workflow. It's improved their, it's part of the job maybe they didn't necessarily love. So yeah, it's kind of maybe my high level, like, wow moment for it, but we'll be going from there.
Yeah, that's really cool that it's not just one from you, but actually seeing someone else have that moment is very exciting. And I think many people can relate. I know I can. I'd love to know how you got to AI agents specifically, because we've had automation and we've had different kinds of AI, but why agents specifically?
So at the time when we were building this data entry automation tool, it was like, I think I talked previously about the bridging the gap between like academic research and actual like building a real business. And that's something that I still to this day super, super interested in. But at the time, like we tried a few more traditional approaches and they just weren't getting us like the right results and they weren't as fast. And to us, we were also very excited about the latest and greatest technology. So I remember we were trying Taxi AI. I don't know if you're familiar with that project or any of the listeners, but it was like one of the first true like DOM parsing agents. It was so cool at the time. Like you could give it a very simple prompt, but it would break sometimes. And that was like our first, like we were using it, we were testing it. We're like, this is amazing. We actually are like, funny enough, like we hunted down the people who created it, and now they're good friends of ours. But at the time, it was like this is a glimpse into like where the future is. Like it's like, okay, wow, this actually works. It was open source, so anybody like can still go out and download it and test it. They're no longer like supporting the research for it, but to me, it was like this is really promising technology if you can fix the reliability side. I think that. And I've talked to the tech team about this before. I think there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of making this agent super reliable. But once we were like testing this and had our hands like in it, we realized that this is very promising in terms of like where the technology can progress long term.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe you could tell me the main focus areas or projects you're working on that are incorporating AI agents.
Basically, anybody who's developing AI agents, our goal is for our SDK to be part of their process from day zero. When you start building an agent, we want AgentOps, like our SDK, our observability layer, to help you in the prototyping stages. And then when you move all the way through to production, we want to help these agent developers as well. So a lot of our customers now are coming and asking us for compliance level analytics so that they can go back to the compliance team and promise almost like a paper trail and audit log basically for what their agents are doing in production. So that's the type of thing where if you're an agent developer and you're very interested in now bridging the gap from, okay, this worked on a perfect path demo, this is really cool as a prototype, to, okay, this is a production grade application that we can now go sell to enterprises. We like kind of going across that whole spectrum from prototype to production. And that's where anybody who's listening, we'd love to kind of chat with them. We're agent agnostic, so doesn't matter how you built your agent, we can support it. And very happy to have some conversations if you are thinking about, okay, like I want to land some big contracts. As great as it is selling, an agent for $20, $30 a month, how can we go, get $2,000, $3,000 a month for your agent at the enterprise grade, and to make sure that like you can build a real business, because there's so many hours that go into developing these things that I want to figure out a way to empower these developers to ultimately profit on them as much as possible. And that's one of the things we're really, really excited about.
Yeah, that's great. Helping agent developers scale something that already works, but maybe isn't quite showtime ready for something huge. I think it's going to be really useful.
And the one thing I'll add there is just as well, like if you're an agent developer inside of a team at an organization, so if you're like, we see these teams like anywhere from like 1 to 50 developers that are just building agents in-house. We love having conversations with these folks as well, where, okay, we built something, we need observability, we need compliance to even get it approved by our team here. And these are the people that we can basically help from day zero as soon as they implement our SDK.
Now that we've talked a little bit about the high level structure of the business, I'd like to get a little bit deeper into designing. What elements have you seen significantly impact the effectiveness of AI agents?
The one that's on top of my mind is like we're just working on a huge update. So it'll be hopefully by the time this episode's released, we'll be out with it. But support for multi-agent frameworks, to be fully frank. There is a ton of amazing research going on the multi-agent front. I think reliability is across the board better. The speed in some regards can be better. Accuracy can be better. So these are the types of aspects that like really excite us. So we've been testing like multi-agent frameworks since like Meta GPT. But from my perspective, I think we're starting to see some of these frameworks emerge, and I can talk to a few of them like Career AI and Swarms and AutoGen in some regards. Like these are incredible ways to start building an agent from day zero. But if you don't understand, like some of these open source projects can have 100 agents working underneath them. Like you need to understand what all these agents are doing, and if you don't, debugging it is an absolute nightmare. So that's one of the things we've been like very focused on right now, is making sure that our platform is incredible for all multi-agent frameworks. And excited to kind of share some updates, when this episode goes live in regards to that.
Awesome. Yeah. For us at Valory, we started with multi-agent, so that's why we're in this in the first place. So I have to totally agree with you there. I think you can do some really incredible things with multi-agent systems that single agents just are not capable of. So now I'd like to look a little bit towards the future and make a few predictions or talk about the progress of the space in general. So we'll start with progress first. In your opinion, how far along do you think we are to self-improving AI, and what steps do you think are maybe ahead of us?
Yeah, self-improving is very interesting. I think like there's a lot of ways to kind of answer that question. But to just simplify it a bit, I think that there are agents right now that can basically have more infinite memory, or like have like a substantially more memory than maybe we had a few months back. So this is maybe the first entrance, is like, I think having like a huge memory store, or like basically having the ability to actually remember a lot of actions and processes. I think that this is maybe the next big step. I think like from my perspective, the advancements need to be made on reliability. And what I mean by this is that I think a lot of people out there who are developers are trying to just go out and trying to solve basically every possible challenge by throwing LLMs at it and trying to solve it with agents. What I'm very interested in is, can we get to very narrow use cases that work reliably, consistently? And like when you start thinking about like enterprise grade adoption, that is the only thing that matters. It's like, it's okay that you can promise me the world in terms of where this is going, but where I'm really interested in is there a very, very niche, hyper-focused use case that Bank of America can start adopting tomorrow, and that they know it's going to be super reliable. They're not going to need to worry about it doing something that's rogue, that might be out of the scope of what the agent should be doing. And that's the stuff that really, really excites me. So like developers are saying, like that's where I would be putting energy towards in the interim.
Yeah, I think all of that could definitely help. I also think that to some extent we maybe won't know what's going to push us over the edge, but I like your approach, because I think you're focusing on something quite practical, which I think is, yeah, we're going to need people who have a very specific and narrow use case, who need something that just works. And
the one thing is, yeah, once you have multiple use cases that work really, really well, it's just a matter of time before you can chain them together and now get like more serious multi-agent, multi-workflow type automations. But it comes down to first ensuring, okay, like almost like what Postman did for APIs. It's like, okay, does this API work? Does this like agentic workflow work? And then if it works well, figure out a way to chain them. And I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, for sure. I have a question now about autonomy, something quite close to our interests. Have we managed to create a truly autonomous agent yet? And if not, what elements do you think are missing for us to achieve it?
Yeah, I think it really depends how you define autonomous. I think that's kind of the most important criteria here. But I will say that even having like an agent that can go and scrape the web and can go and like visit multiple websites. So there's a really cool agent called Herbie. And I email it and I say, hey, can you go research me a blog, or can you go research me research information for me about a company? And it will go out on the internet. It'll research. It'll come back to me saying, what do you think about these links? Should I continue going through these links? To me, there's like a form of autonomy there. I gave it I gave it a general idea, and it went out and it's coming back and asking me but it's acting autonomously. Like I've given it a prompt, and now it's keeping the human in the loop. And this is the type of stuff that really, really excites me. Like I think that it's these are tasks that I'm very confident I can go out and do myself. But if I can just have an email conversation or a Slack conversation with an agent, and it can go do a task that's as effectively as me, can extract information as effectively as me, can synthesize the data, and I think the biggest piece is actually source where the information came from. That's autonomous in a lot of regards. So that's stuff that really amps me up. But yeah, I think we have maybe using a baseball analogy, I think we're still in like the minor leagues in terms of getting something that's fully autonomous in nature, but we will get to something that is like MLB level, state of the art, hitting a home run every time. But I still think right now we're still like doing some testing and seeing, okay, what is the right technology, what is the right agents, what is the right methodology to actually get us to the big leagues.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. And I think you're onto something, that autonomy is really a question of what your use case is and what you're happy with as an end result, right? What do you think the next big capability unlock might be?
I could say that where I kind of envision the future going, maybe is like an interesting way to phrase this, is that in the next year or two, I could see every employee at every major organization having some type of agent working for them. I think they're going back to what I was talking about before, but like hyper verticalized use cases. You have these super hyper verticalized use cases where these agents are incredible at doing it, can do it reliably. And when you start your job at day one at Uber, for example, and you're on the sales team, you are going to get a sales agent. When you start, day one on HR, you will have an HR specific agent. When you work at a bank as a financial analyst, day one on your job, you will have this financial analyst that is there with you throughout your entire career. And maybe the capabilities will grow alongside your roles and responsibilities. You'll be able to permission these agents in a way that, you can have basically put guardrails in place to know exactly what, these agents can do, what data source they have access to, who they can interact with. And I think this is the type of stuff that really, really excites me. So I'm really envisioning this world. I'm talking to a bunch of institutions who share a very similar vision, but I think that like long term, you will have like every employee will also have at least one virtual employer, one agent working for them. And I think maybe you'll have multiple, like maybe you'll have entire teams of agents working with you. And this is like the future that like I think a lot of people had wished. Like for a long time we're doing offshoring to other countries, just trying to figure out like virtual assistants who could do tasks that maybe were expensive to do overseas. And I think that from my perspective, I think that these people overseas are now going to be supercharged as well. Like you're going to have, one of these overseas workers have access to agents. They are going to have supercharged their productivity. Instead of working with one client, they're going to be able to work with 10 clients. And this is the type of stuff that really, really excites me in terms of like global productivity. I think you're going to see this like massive shift in productivity. And, you might have some like Luddites who come along and try to, break it. But the reality is like where this technology is progressing. And I think a lot of the like work on the open source front, I don't think we're going to be in a position where you're going to have like true Luddites who are able to just like stop machines and, say like, hey, this is not happening anymore. I think it's something that like everyone is going to have to adapt in their workplace and in their companies to remain competitive.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see that. Just a certain, there's enough utility and usefulness, both as you were saying in the earlier part of our conversation at the the enterprise level, but also just as a new employee, the idea of coming on with the current model, what we assign you somebody to mentor you, but they have their own work to do, so they can only do that for a couple of days. So having agents to help at that level, like that's a super practical. I think anyone could imagine that.
Yeah, I was reading this really interesting book called An Elegant Puzzle. I'm not quite done it yet, but there's a part in the book that discusses how like a manager can only support their people that they manage so much. Even if you want to set a cadence, for 30 minutes every 2 weeks, you want to meet with a person, or every month or whatever it might be. Like you are bound by the amount of time that you can actually offer people. The nice thing about like these agents is they're limited by compute. Otherwise, like they can work 24/7, 365. They can be, instead of asking, I remember like when I was working at a previous company, like sometimes I'd have questions for the CEO or something like that at 9, 10 p.m. at night. He's got his own stuff going on. Like he doesn't want to answer my questions, but if you could have a CEO agent who is trained on all the knowledge of the company, who can answer all these questions, to me that's like really, really interesting, where now you have this person who can actually in real time go answer your questions, and you don't feel awkward about messaging them late at night, and they have maybe can give you a perspective that's akin to the CEO. And that's like, I think that's kind of the promise here, is just like empower everybody to be like way more productive than they currently are. And I think that there are going to be entire industries that come up based on this. I think there's going to be maybe a rejigging of a lot of people's roles to say, okay, we have AI agents that are working with us day in, day out, and this is part of like, they are part of our team. Like they are like integral parts of our team, and we won't be able to operate without them. And that's like that's really exciting from my perspective.
So yeah, what you've been talking about reminds me that right now your bio on X says your job is safe, and I'd love to have you unpack that a little bit.
So I will say that your job is safe with the caveat that like you're willing to adopt this technology. So if you're like looking at the latest and greatest technology and you're like, how is this going to impact my job? My biggest recommendation for people is just test stuff. See if it's interesting to you. See if you think it could be applicable to your job. Even if it's not on the clock, on the weekends, look at this technology and see, can this actually make an impact? And the one caveat I always recommend is, second caveat is like, make sure you're the person who actually brings it forth to your company. If you can be the innovation lead who brings this amazing technology forth to your company, they're going to seek massive productivity benefits. They're going to, love you as an employee because you've now rejigged how they think about hiring, how they think about actually being, as productive as possible, and just be very willing to adopt it. Like, don't be and maybe this sounds a bit harsh, but like, don't be the Luddites who want to just, figure out ways to eliminate these systems from existing. Like, the processes are here, the technology's here. It's not like it's going to be very, very difficult to not adopt it. And I think that like the firms of the future are going to be the ones who can effectively create like a strategy from ground zero to say like across our entire organization, we are, AI first. We are thinking about how to actually automate a lot of these processes that are, employees are doing that are not necessarily human aspects of their job. And like, as you kind of start looking, where can I actually adopt this technology? We have a website called Staf.ai, so staff with one F, and recommend just like looking through all the agents that we have on there. And these are like, it's a really good starting point to see, okay, this is what's out there in the market. This is what we can, maybe this could be applicable, test them, book demo calls. A lot of these founders on that list are our good friends, and they're more than willing to chat with you and see if they can help automate your processes. And as well, like if anyone's interested, like reach out to me and I'm happy to point you in the right direction to some really interesting agents that we love.
Yeah, for sure. I think those are all really good recommendations. So you've already given us some recommended reading and learning resources, and I'll get those links into the description box. So yeah, maybe we could close with, where can people keep up with what you're working on and you in general?
Awesome. Yeah. So best places like LinkedIn or Twitter. So LinkedIn, my name is just Adam Silverman. On Twitter, it's Atom, ATOM Silverman. And then if you want like AgentOps specific updates, we're AgentOps AI on Twitter. And then we have like a great Discord community that would love to bring you into. Also, like if you're interested in like specific reading, if you want like I put together a guide a while ago and I can share it with you to put in the show notes of just like, people ask me, okay, how do I get started on AI? And I think I put like 10 or 12 articles together that are just like from ground zero. It doesn't like, I think like in theory, a 10-year-old could read them and get a ton of value from them, especially if you're a parent as well, who's like, hey, how do I make sure like my kids understand where the future is going? Some of it might be a bit dense, but I think it's a very, good starting point. And I'm happy to put that in the show notes. We can kind of, I think it's a good like kind of jump board or springboard for a lot of people.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I love being able to share resources, so I'll definitely be sure to put those in the show notes. So we can leave it here. Thank you, Adam. It's been very interesting talking with you, and I really enjoyed it. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right, well, that is it for this episode of AI Frontiers. To learn more about Valory, what we're working on, our open source framework for co-owned AI, ways that you can get involved, or running your own autonomous agent services, check us out at valory.xyz. You can also follow us on X, where we are at ValoryAG. Until next time.